Hello, my name is Latoya Richardson. I reside in the Bronx and I attend a church named Hope's Way. I would love to share my testimony of how God has ministered to me and the journey I've been on and the direction where I'm heading thus far. I grew up in a Christian home. Both my parents was Christians and was raised Christian. So naturally, when I was born, I understood that, I was going to serve the same God and faith. But growing up in urban communities, seeing different struggles, it was pretty much hard to have such a passionate faith as my mother and my father did, seeing all the disparities. And later on, I would go through my own personal disparities as far as having a learning disability, being an African American, and growing up in the projects. For a long time, nobody knew that I had a learning disability. I did poorly in my academics, and I grew up in a phase where you would fail and then they automatically push you up, move you on. So I was being promoted to go on to the next grade and the next grade, and I didn't know how to read and I didn't know my alphabets and certain things that I should have learned in first grade and second grade. Here I was in the fourth grade, not able to do the same thing as my peers. And as you can imagine, with not being able to read and write as my classmates, I got teased and picked on. So that resulted in a lot of fights, a lot of visits to the principal office, and just missing out on certain things as far as gym and other functional things that other students would do just because I was being punished. And then we had to take an exam. And once again, I acted out so I can avoid taking the exam. And a teacher finally decided that I should be tested. Once I got tested, I didn't know. They just gave me a whole bunch of vigorous tests and just told me, it's okay, just do the best of my ability. So back in the 90s, I didn't necessarily have a target name as to what type of learning disability. All I knew is that I had a learning disability and I was being moved from my regular mainstream, that's what they called it at the time, classroom setting, to special education classroom setting where there was fewer students and more teachers. So I continue on in special education from being in the fourth grade through junior high school and even into high school. As you can imagine, that's the time when you're trying to, meet different, people, figure out what social group setting you're in, and possibly get into a relationship. I recall being very frustrated with God. I was frustrated with God on so many different levels. Why did I look this way? Why was my parents this way? Why I couldn't learn at the same pace as everyone? I just thought I was frustrated with God because I thought, well, if he's this great, wonderful person that loves you and wants the best for you, then why do I see so many flaws in myself? And that started to impact my relationship with God deeply because I felt like, well, if I'm not going to get it from here, and at the time I felt like God wasn't listening to my prayers, then maybe I should go search out and find that love and find someone who loved me in different places, not necessarily the correct places, but just in different avenues. And pretty much when it took, as far as it relates to school, I pretty much gave up on myself. At the time, the school system wasn't as advanced as it is right now. So many of the services that are starting to be offered for people and individuals just like myself that learn differently and have different learning styles wasn't offered at my age. So what I began to do is slowly started to figure out whether maybe I just need to leave school. So in high school, it was just a balance of whether or not I was going to commit to staying in school and getting my degree, or whether I would just drop out and find something else to do. I began to look for love in other places and not necessarily with God. And one of those places was looking for love from another person. As a result, I ended up getting pregnant while I was in high school. The fortunate part of getting pregnant was it began to spark something, because I had decided that I would keep my child. And in making that decision with keeping my child at the age of 18, I began to start to say, what am I going to do? And I remember a counselor saying, well, I can drop out, because I had so many other state exams that I needed to take. So I recall my guidance counselor telling me that, hey, I'm 18, time is against me, and I'm with child, that I can drop out and hopefully find a trade. And I remember my mom being present and asking me, what do I want to do? And right there, it was such a life-changing decision to make. I had decided that I was going to give it a shot with trying my chances of completing high school and getting a regular high school diploma, even though I had many state tests that I had to, or state exams that I had to pass, and I still learned differently from my peers. So with making that decision, with staying in high school, I started to want more, because at that time I knew that I had to provide for my son. So that desire to want more started to propel me. And I did come across one teacher who would call me Sweet Pea. Her name was Miss Smith. Miss Smith knew that I was pregnant and I was in high school, and she really started to give me the tools so that I can learn. And that's when it started to click on me. It's not that I was slow or dumb. It was just that I learned differently. And although at that time, still in high school, I didn't know exactly what was my learning disability, I began to, a light switch clicked off in my head, and I began to realize that I can learn. It's just the way and the method that was being taught to me. And perhaps learning from a different method or a different teacher was more suitable for me. So many of the times I would go back to my teacher that I was comfortable with and I learned better from, which is Miss Smith, and she would go over the work. And there was some times that I would eat lunch and study. There was some times that I would come in earlier and study with her. And then there was some times that I would stay after school and study with her. And I began to understand how, and at my time, my learning skills at that particular point was very visual. So if it had not been for Miss Smith being very animated, I probably wouldn't have wanted to stay in high school, because I really wasn't getting it. But the other key thing about Miss Smith was she was also a Christian. She was very supporting and giving me the tools. And I believe that she was, God sent, heavenly sent, placed in my life, because we shared the same similar belief system. And if it wasn't for her, my time in high school would have been more stressful than it needed to be. After I got my high school diploma and I attended my graduation, I was so happy. But still, I was deep down inside, I was still frustrated, because I still didn't know what direction I was heading in. And although I grew up as a Christian and I believed in God, I just felt like he wasn't really listening to me. Because here I am, a single parent, fresh out of high school, what next? And that became the question that I asked myself continually. What do I do next? What's going to happen? I didn't have a sense of security. So because here it was, my relationship with God wasn't as strong as I saw others. I had siblings that were speaking in tongues, My parents spoke in tongues. One of my siblings was gifted in the prophetic, and I just felt like I didn't fit in. And even if God was real, then he wasn't listening to me. Maybe I messed up. So it was really a battle of going back and forth of being angry at God, resenting God, or not thinking I was good enough. And that's why I was going through what I was going through, because God didn't like me. So I never really strayed completely away from God. He was always somewhat in my life, but at the time, my attention was always fluctuated. As far as one minute I was reading my Bible, and then the next minute I was like, this is pointless. I'm still going through what I'm going through. My circumstances are still real. And at the time, I was still living with my mom, and I didn't want to stay with my mom with a child. I wanted to have more, but I didn't know what more looked like, or what that meant, or what to do. So, and in the beginning, I started to attend a church with Pastor Al, and it was a little distance from where I lived. And he referred me to be underneath Pastor Rachel. And Pastor Rachel Church was closer to mine. And I remember her from being an elder from the Lower East Side. So I said, okay, let me give it a shot. So I had said to God at that particular time, I had said to God, okay, I'm going to give you 2 years. Matter of fact, not 2 years. Originally, I wanted to say 2 years, but I was like, that's too much of a commitment for me. So I said to God, I'll give you 1 year. Now, if you can do the changes that I need, if you listen, and if you're real, and you can do all these things that people say you can do, and that other people say that you have done in their life, and what I read about in the Bible, then definitely you can do something with me. So I began my journey at Hope's Way Church with saying to myself, I'm giving 1 year just to see if this God is really real and real for me. During that time period, a lot has changed in my life. I had another child. I had moved out of my mother's house, and I was living on my own. And I was still back and forth with college. I did enter college. And when I entered college, I had learned what exactly my learning disability was. So I went through years of not knowing, to finally getting to college to learn that I had 2 types of learning disabilities. Ultimately, I would come to learn that my learning disabilities was dyslexia, both with words and with numbers. And it was interesting because in hindsight, looking back in my life, it made sense. All the way I used to write, and how I could never really understand hooked on phonics, and that was very popular in the 90s. It made sense. And it also felt like a sense of relief, because now I can find the tools of how people or individuals such as myself with dyslexia can learn. So I would hate to paint the picture that everything was smooth. I went to Hope's Way and everything became like flowers in the field, and rainbows came out and butterflies flew around me. But that wasn't the case. I still had different struggles as far as being able to be a provider for my sons, being involved in their life, and being on top of them with their academics so that they don't experience the same hardship. And also paying the bills, knowing how to budget, all these different things, and came into my life, and all these different things that I still wasn't ready to handle or knew how to handle. So there was periods where I would just pray to God and get frustrated with God, because I would feel like I'm not being heard once again. And then there was different things where God would use someone to minister to me, to speak to me, whether it'll be I'm sitting in a pew listening to one of the leaders of Hope's Way deliver a message, and them not knowing that that message just ministered to me, because just a week ago I was getting ready to call it quits, because I didn't know what exactly, my life, how my life was supposed to be. I knew what I wanted, but how my life actually looked compared to what I wanted was very frustrating. And I remember having these dreams, and I would have the same dream over and over at different times. And in a nutshell, the dream was me trying to control everything. And I realized that maybe perhaps that's what God was trying to convey to me, which that's exactly what he was, that I was trying to be in control. But if I just allow him to be in control and be the driver, that I'll get to where my destination is meant for me to be. And that's what the journey began to unfold, and for me to trust God. So my journey have been a lot of trusting God, even with what society, what, parents, individuals, all different types of people place on you. It began to reveal to me that I need to trust God more, even when I don't trust myself, even when things don't look or feel right, to trust him. And for the most part, there was a lot of times that I didn't trust God. And it took me some time to get to the destination where I ultimately was going to arrive at. But eventually, as I started to see slowly but surely, when I started to trust God, things did turn around. It wasn't always easy. It wasn't always easy. And it didn't always look nice. And it didn't always feel right. Where I wanted to go one way, I wanted to do one thing. To me, it seems better. It shined, it glittered. So I was like, yeah, I think I should do this. When in actuality, waiting or just reading or just studying or just spending time with God was what I needed at that time for when the occasion arrived, to be there and be able to do the things that I ultimately wanted to do. Interestingly enough, God would use people to tell me to do certain things. And I would like to say a little bit about me is I can be stubborn in my ways, and it could work against me or it could work for me. So I recall one time being told to read a particular scripture in the Bible. And boy, sometimes certain things in the Bible I didn't want to read. There's certain things that I enjoy reading in the Bible. And then there's certain things that I was like, oh, these words are too big and I don't really understand what's going on. And I would not, ultimately, I wouldn't read it because I'll be like, I'll get back to it. And I never get back to it because deep down inside, I didn't want to read it. Lo and behold, something would arise, particularly at work. I would have a situation at work and didn't know how to handle it and be frustrated because of the way that I was handling it wasn't the most successful for me. And then I will go back to the reading that I was told to read. And the solution was right there in the Bible. Different time, different era, but the same situation that was occurring in the Bible ministered to me and made me understand, okay, this is how I should respond to this situation. And sure enough, I took the tools of what I read and what I learned in the Bible and applied it to work. And it actually worked for me. It actually helped me to be humble, actually to help me to reduce my stress and not to bring work home, as they say. Another example is when I had got my city job and I felt like, okay, I made it. I'm a conqueror. I got a city job, so I don't need to worry about anything. I don't need to finish college, because at the time I was still in college in pursuit of getting my bachelor's degree. So once I got the employment of being a city employee, I decided to drop out of college. When what was ministered to me is that God wanted me to stay in college. And I was told God, like, okay, I already arrived. I already made it. I don't need this degree. And lo and behold, certain situations at work would change, different staff, different chain of command. And it required me to ultimately have a degree. After all, I wanted more pay, more salary, more. I wanted the doors to open up a little bit broader for me, but that required a degree. So here I was when I had dropped out of college, and I would say I stood away from college unofficially, dropped out of my college for 2 years, to know that ultimately I would go right back to the same college and get the degree. So when I went to my prayer closet and had a conversation with God, I said, you know what, God, you was right. So me and God kind of had a laugh out at that situation, and I was like, you know what, God, forgive me, and I'm gonna try to trust you more, because what tends to happen is that I would say, okay, I trust you, God, and then when I felt like I had the solution, grab it right back and say, you know what, God, I got this one. I'm gonna show you, and God wins all the time. So the period of time when I was in church, working, in college, being an active parent, single parent at that, with two different children with two different personalities, there was definitely a lot of ups and downs. There was definitely a lot of times that, quite frankly, I would spend my nights, sad and alone and crying. My kids didn't know. This was, past their bedtimes, but there was a lot of responsibilities, and I didn't know how to manage it. So most of my prayers was help me. It was one of those, God, show me, point me in a direction, show me even something as simple as, God, what page should I turn the Bible to and read? So what I would say was a lot of me crying out. It was a lot of me keeping it real, with telling God exactly how I felt. If I felt lonely, if I felt, let's be honest, suicidal, if I felt that I couldn't do it. There was many times that I would literally walk to college, well, get off the train, walk on campus, and cry just before starting my class, because my assignments wasn't complete, or I did the assignment but didn't really understand it. And then also thinking about the next day of, okay, I have a parent teacher conference coming up, or my son is not doing well in this subject. So it was always a plethora of how do I balance. And what ultimately ended up happening is that I didn't have all the solutions right then and there. But what I did do is reach out to my pastor, my, those that was there in my life, my Sunday school teacher, my sisters, and I asked for prayer, and I fast. And I didn't give up. Even when I felt like I couldn't make it, I still held on to God. And I remember saying, well, God, if you can just show me. So little by little, the solutions started to unfold, as far as, okay, you need to cut back on spending over here. If it was a budgeting matter, okay, you need to learn how to tithe, because believe it or not, tithing is important. Tithing is essential, because if you want to be able to maintain a budget and stuff like that, but you can't even be faithful with paying your tithe and offering, it all works itself out. So all these different things that I encountered, it was to lead me to the position that I'm currently in as an office manager, and in preparation to where I'm going, or who else I'm supposed to minister to the little Latoya that's coming up behind me, who experienced similar, or if not the same situation and circumstances and trials that I experienced. So it wasn't everything just resolved itself. It wasn't that I didn't feel frustrated, or I didn't go through periods where I gave up on God and had to recommit to our relationship. It was on and off, but just staying and continually allowing God to show me where to place my foot, or him holding my hand, it got me to where I am right now. So I would say it was never giving up. It was always seeking. So a lot of it was seeking, even when I didn't have the answers, even when I did have the answers, but didn't trust so much wholeheartedly. Just asking God, saying, here's where I'm at. I'm going to do this, but I don't see how this is going to work. And God showing up each time. for people that's trying to figure the things out and trying to, whether it's with your employment, whether it's with college or academic school, no matter what grade level, talking about elementary, junior high school, college, masters, you name it. I'm going to tell you my secret: resources. So resources, utilize your resources. If you don't know what your resources is, get involved in your community, find someone who can help you locate what your resources is. I didn't make it just because I had a lot of money and to splurge on a personal tutor. No, not by a long shot. What it was is that I had to find out when the college was offering free tutoring service. So if they was offering it early in the day, late at night, whenever I had the opportunity, of course, I had to fit it around my schedule, because after all, I was a single parent and I had other responsibilities. I found out my resources. I found out about Access VR. I found out about, even within my employment, with training and free training and free seminars and certifications that my job offered. I just got involved with finding out what are my resources and how does the community help, whether it be an African American female, whether it be an individual with the learning ability, whether it be a single parent, even with speaking to the leaders in Hope's Way ministry, finding out, how can I be a better assistant, or these are my issues, or these are my circumstances. And once I learned, and once I found out these tools, not being selfish, sharing it. You never know who else have the same issues, or who else is a single parent that's struggling too. But we shouldn't struggle alone. And what I've learned that over the years is that some of the things that if I knew sooner, maybe my life would be different. But it also ministered to me to know that what I know and what I experience is a gift to someone else. To be someone that can just share and not just hover, or not just hold in, or not to just suffer alone. So with all these different, whether it be scholarships, whether it be Access VR, whether it be the tutoring centers, whether it be Head Start, calling 311 if you're within the New York City tri-state area, just finding out what are your resources. And with finding out your outside resources, also finding out your Christian, your God sent, your Jesus Christ resources, because ultimately he's the resource that you want to align yourself with, because when he opens doors, no one can close those doors. So I believe that God is the ultimate resource, and everywhere else is sub resource, but also just getting to know your resources, because there's different things out there as it relates to academics, with whether you can get a laptop that actually read back, or whether if you can't see, whether you can need different devices to zoom in things to make it larger so you can see. But there's just a whole plethora of things out there in the world that can help you along the way. But as they say, a closed mouth don't get fed. So if you don't speak up, or you don't share a little bit and step outside your shell, then how can you get the help that you need for either you, a sibling, a loved one, someone in your ministry, and so on. So if you're struggling with your faith, which I think is an understatement to say, because I feel like everyone struggle at some point in their path and their journey, I say, put God to the test. Put him to the test. Simple as that. And be open-minded that God is not limited to responding to the way you think that he should respond. Be open-minded that his response can come in different variations. You just got to be open. So put him to the test. Have real conversations. You don't have to be able to pray like this person or fast like this person. I know a lot of people talk about the Daniel fast, but there's different ways to fast. There's different ways to say, God, here I am. Remember, God is the one that went after the one sheep, left all the other ones because that one sheep he saw the value in. So if you're struggling, remember, A, you don't have to struggle alone. B, just go to God with that struggle. And with going to God, that could be a letter to him. That could be a conversation, a prayer, a song, a dance. It could just be in the comfort of your own home with the door closed, just screaming, saying, God, this is where I'm at. I need your help. And believe it or not, he'll meet you. So it's praying, trusting, seeking. That's what you want to do. And yes, you will need to do it over and over at some times. But as long as you keep getting back up, as long as you keep holding on, I believe you'll make it. Look at me. I feel like, not I feel like, I know I have. So just trust and get back up. Dust yourself off. Life is many things. It's beautiful. It's sad. It's warming. So with all these different emotions, all these different roads and turns and twists and bumps, no one ever was promised everything will be fine. No one, not even the richest person. Believe it or not, the richest person, the person that has everything that they can want, they have issues too. So you, me, your pastor, your parents, whomever, your spouse, no one is exception from going through their own personal struggles. Yeah, it may look a little bit different, but a struggle is a struggle. So holding on to the faith, trusting in God or the higher being, Jesus, what you choose to call him, but just trusting and having faith that it does get better and not giving up. You don't know how your journey will truly minister to someone else's. And that's why I say it's okay. It's okay to have those hard times because they don't last for long. You would think that when you get to the end, it gets better. No. My last semester was the most gut-wrenching. Like, I was like, are you serious? I get all this way for it to get even harder. The challenges just kind of ooze out. I was like, are you kidding me? But I was invested at that particular point. So once I got my master's degree, my bachelor's, look at me speaking by faith, right? But I remember having a conversation with my pastors, giving the testimony. Yay, won't he do it? Amen, hallelujah, got my bachelor's. I'm out, chucking up the deuces. My pastor says, you have to go back. She says more than that, but to the nutshell, she was like, you got to go back. So I was like, God bless you. Amen. Hallelujah. Ain't going back. So then I started to speak to other people and say, yeah, I got my bachelor's. They was like, okay, you going back. And it became this memento, or like this unofficial reputation of people saying, okay, you're going back for your master's, or the assumption that I was going back for my master's. And then once again, I started to have hardships and struggles within my employment and trying to see where else, what else is next. And it ultimately pointed me into my master's. When I sat down and I created a vision board. But let's go back. The vision board actually took place in 2015. I had pre-wrote a vision board with the help of my pastor's daughter. And when she wrote everything out, it did ended up with me going for my master's somewhere along the line on that list. And still I was like, oh, she crazy. I ain't going for that. And then jump forward a few years later, and here it was. I was revisiting the goals and that I had jotted down with her and tweaking it, coming up with, one second, my personal goals and my vision. Ultimately, I say all that to say, it ended with me going back to go get my master's. Now, here's the tricky thing about it. Here I am now, after hearing my pastors, my family and friends saying, okay, you're going back for your master's. I see this in you. And God using people to minister to me, to tell me to go back. Here I am having the same struggle as it was when I was starting off to go for my bachelor's, saying, I don't want to go back. I'm happy. Is there any other way around this? And ultimately, this time, I said, instead of taking off that whole period and literally running away from what God has called me to do, what ended up happening, I said, here I am. Let's do this. So when I got to that point where I decided, you know what? Okay, God, I'm going to give this a try. You said it. At first I was like, do I really have to? But once God puts that stamp of approval, I said, okay. But things didn't look, and that's been the story of my life. Things didn't look promising for me to get into a master program. And why I say that is I go back to when I graduated with my bachelor's. I didn't graduate with the most fascinating or most, prestigious GPA. In fact, it was low. It was kind of terrible, but I was happy that I graduated, but I had a whole bunch of other things going on. My child, who now was entering into adulthood, was graduating from high school the same time I was graduating from college. And I was juggling with his graduation, my graduation, working full time. And also on top of that, being a PTA president at my youngest son's school, junior high school, and being involved in worship as far as being a worship dancer. So I had a whole bunch of things going on, and work was extremely frustrated. And I couldn't, anyone that knows me knows that I had a huge journey with overcoming some issues and struggles at work to add the cherry on the top. So what ended up happening is that I just trust God. I said, okay, God, you want me to go back to college. I'm going to put in my effort. Matter of fact, I'm not going to just cheat you, God. I'm going to do all of what I can do. And if it's truly meant to be for me to go to college for my master's degree, if it's truly, this is what you truly want, then God, you're going to have to make this miracle, because my GPA is under 3.0. And I don't really have the finances to cover this. So I'm going to write this personal statement. I'm going to invest the time and find out about this program. But Father God, you're going to have to do the rest. And sure enough, he did the rest. I remember working on my personal statement, and some of the leaders from Hope's Way Ministry looked at it and helped me and coached me along the way. But ultimately, I had to do the work. It wasn't someone else wrote it for me. I mean, literally, I kid you not, I wrote my personal statement 60 times. 60 times. It was 60 different versions until I got to the polished one where I was ready to submit. And even before I submitted it, best believe I got a lot of prayer over it. But when I did submit it, it should have taken 2 weeks for them to respond back. But they respond back in 3 days. And when I saw the email, I was nervous. I was like, okay. And then I had to dial it back, and I said, you know what? Remember, can't be nervous. because I trust God. And I said, God, if this is really what you want me to do, I did all that I can do. Now you have to do the rest. And when I open up the email, it says, you've been accepted. So right now, the end of this month, August, I will be attending John Jay College for my master's in public administration, procedures and protocols. And it's an honor. So if God can take this young lady who grew up in the project, was raised by one parent, and had a learning disability, and the learning disability was discovered from the 4th grade, and then come all the way to where now I work for a city agency and I'm working on my master's degree. I'm so interested to see what else, I'm called to do, what else that I can do to not only better my life, but to better my son's life and anyone else that experienced what I experienced, and not just being confined by what society say your social status is and how far you're supposed to go. I believe that labels can come off. Labels are not permanent. Just like someone can put a label on you, you have the power to take it off. You have the power to even do it quicker and faster and better with God.